Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call the June 12th, 2017 meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education to order at the OSD Innovation Center at the high school. Mrs. Wick, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Feeney?
Present.
Ms. Oderico?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Present.
Mr. Raymond?
Here.
Mr. Kraus?
Yo.
Mr. LeBrun? Mr. Zock?
Present, and the record should reflect that Mr. LeBrun had indicated to me that he would be absent tonight. He is traveling, and so discussed that ahead of time with me. I have proof that this meeting has been properly noticed under Wisconsin open meetings law. The certificate of those postings are at the desk with Ms. Wick if anyone wants to inspect them. Her agenda tonight contains a number of action items and some information items, and we'll have a closed session at the conclusion of our regular meeting where we will go into closed session and will not return to open session. I need a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
And we got a second, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries by unanimous voice vote. Item A on our agenda is the consent calendar. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any board member wishes to have removed? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items. Jeff Raymond with the motion, second with Barb Feeney. Before we vote, I just want to acknowledge a number of donations. We received donations from the Bill and Phyllis Bartlett Athletic Training Endowment Fund, care of the Dane County Medical Society in the amount of $500, and then the Oregon Adult Volleyball League for $1,000 to the athletic department. Exxon Education and Oil Company gave $500 each for use at Brooklyn. And then we have splash pad donations in the amount of $250 from Barb and Bill Feeney. Thanks, Barb. $200 from John and Lisa Gitz, $200 from David Plumbing LLC and Eric Updike, and then a donation from Deb Lewis that I don't have the amount on. Thank you very much for those contributions, folks, and for your support of the Oregon School District. Ms. Wood, would you call the roll on the motion to approve the items on the consent calendar?
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes, those motions, or those items are approved by unanimous vote. Item B on the agenda is communications from the public, and unless the Majeski girls want to speak this evening, I think we can move on. No? Oh, boy and girl. So we'll move on from that. I don't see anyone from the OEA, and our student is in transition to the next school year. So we'll move on to item D, 2017-2018 CISA 2 contract. Brian, or I think that's yours, and I think this is just a matter of course.
This is a standard contract that we work with on CISA 2, and we've had no changes. The only potential change, and we will bring it back to you, is if we cannot secure an audiologist. We've been hiring our own, but if we're not able to do that this year, we might be back with an amendment to the contract. But today's recommendation is to approve it as presented, and if we're not able to hire an audiologist, we'll be back with an amendment to the contract.
Anyone have any questions of Brian? Dan?
I don't have a question, but I want to move that we approve the CISA 2 2017-18 contract.
Dan with the motion, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Mr. Raymond, any questions or opinions regarding that? Seeing none, Janie, would you call the roll?
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes, motion carries by a 6-0 vote. And Brian, would you see that that's executed and sent to CISA 2?
Yes.
We have a number of items from policy, and I'll turn it over to Crystal Flanagan on those. I'll take them one at a time. The first one is policy 564, prevention of the aiding and abetting of sexual abuse, which we discussed at the last meeting. The floor is yours, Krista.
Okay, as Steve mentioned, policy 564, we did spend some time talking about this at the last board meeting. Again, like this one as well as all the others are coming from federal regulations and have a deadline of us approving them by July 1st. The one change that you will see in 564 from the last board meeting is the first sentence of 564.01. No district employee, contractor, or agent may assist a school employee, contractor, or agent in obtaining a new job. That came because we wanted to broaden it a little bit in terms of not just this district, but if we had a district employee, contractor, or agent that knew of someone going to work in a school, that we wanted to make sure that this policy addressed that. So that is really the change that's coming from discussion of the policy committee.
Okay. So are you moving on behalf of the policy committee for the board approval of 564?
Yes.
Okay, so that will be a motion coming from policy. As such, it does not need a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Janie, would you call the roll?
Ms. Flanagan.
Yes.
Mr. Raymond.
Yes.
Mr. Kraus.
Yes.
Ms. Feeney.
Yes.
Ms. Oderico.
Yes.
Mr. Zak.
Yes, that policy is approved 6-0. Thanks, policy committee. The next policy is foster care number 326. Kristen.
Okay, I think as everybody's probably read through this prior to the meeting, this addresses students who are in foster care that are enrolled in our district, and just the policies and procedures that we have regarding students that are in foster care here. One thing you will note, and Gina, jump in at any time, that 326.04, that the district will work with the applicable child welfare agency to provide transportation. And so in most cases, that's Dane County, but we would work with any applicable welfare agency to determine transportation. If, for instance, if a student was in foster care and started the year here, and then for some reason went to a different municipality for their foster care, but wanted to finish the school year here, that we would work with that agency about transportation, so that student in their best interest would be to finish school here. So that's what we're addressing in that area, just to give you a little bit more background information. But again, the policy committee moves approval of this. Policy 326, students in foster care.
Coming from policy, it does not need a second. Is there any discussion or questions? I have one. In 326.04, it indicates that with respect to transportation costs, if there is not an agreement as to how those are going to be handled, that costs will be shared equally. And then the next sentence goes on to establish a dispute resolution through the district superintendent. And my question was, why do we need a resolution and appeal process when we have a determinative method of applying costs, that if you can't agree, you don't need appeal process because they just get split equally?
So I can speak to that. So what ESSA, the federal law where this comes from, what they talk about is that your policy has to have a dispute resolution process. And so what WASB and other districts have recommended is that the board state its position in policy, but we have to work it out with the other agency. So you have to have a place for the agency and the foster care liaison to go if they ultimately can't agree. But if we have it in policy, then it gives us a discussion point with the county to say our board wants us to split it equally.
Okay.
But it's not binding on the agency itself.
The division equally.
Right.
Okay, I got it. That makes sense then. So, and I had given Krista some edits from grammar. I don't know how you want to handle those, if you deal with them later or what.
Yeah, I looked through them and they don't seem material, they're just kind of wording, so I think
Do
we're
you
fine.
want to deal with it on the policy committee level? Okay. Because I'm okay if you look at those, they're not a big deal. Okay. So we have a motion from policy committee. Any other questions? Dan?
Just a comment. One thing that I was curious about is why we wanted to put Cynthia DiCamelli's name in this because that position may change or the person in the position may change, but apparently it's part of the federal mandate that we have a person's name in this, so that if Cynthia is no longer the person that does this particular liaison job, then we do need to change the policy to name whoever the new person is. It's just a point of interest and something to keep an eye on.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, with that, Ms. Wood, would you call the roll?
Ms. Flanagan.
Yes.
Mr. Raymond.
Yes.
Mr. Kraus.
Yes?
Ms. Feeney.
Yes.
Ms. Oderico.
Yes.
Mr. Zak.
Yes, that policy is adopted 6-0, subject to review by policy with regard to any language or grammar changes. The next item on the policy agenda is 721 wellness.
Okay, you're going to notice quite a few strikeouts. A lot of that is consolidation of language, so don't be alarmed by a lot of strikeouts. And so I'll kind of walk you through some of the changes here. First is 721.02.1 is food service department is now called the school meal program. So we made that change in here. A lot of what we're talking about is things that we're well ahead of in this district. So we're pretty proud of the fact that we're ahead of a lot of the national standards and actually are kind of a model. So that's really wonderful. A lot of this talks about what we are doing during the school day in terms of food and snacks and being nutritious. So any kind of marketing we're doing or getting rid of vending machines. So really trying to make sure that from top to bottom, we're providing kids with the healthiest food and beverages that we can. It also addresses fundraisers, and as you have looked through celebrations and parties, that we're really trying to, again, reinforce to parents that are bringing in snacks or teachers that are offering this in classrooms that it's healthy snacks. And also addressing some of the equity concerns that we have in terms of fundraisers or fundraisers that are offered by school groups. So you'll notice that in here too, so we're really trying to focus on some of those things. The other thing that's different is that the board is now designating the Director of Community Education as the Wellness Coordinator. And so we also will have a Wellness Committee that, as you see in 721.08.03, it's now mandated who is on that Wellness Committee. So there's a board representative, administrators, the school meal program director, and so on. So those were kind of some of the highlights. Gina, I don't know if you have anything else to add?
No, that was an excellent summary.
So we have a motion from the policy committee to adopt the revisions to 721 school wellness policy.
Yes, on behalf of the policy committee, I'll move to approve 721, the school wellness policy.
Any questions, Jeff?
Just wondering if the motivation for the changes, they were internal and not driven by federal changes or anything?
These changes were also driven by federal law. We participate in the federal lunch program, then we are required to have certain components.
I have a question.
Courtney?
I have a question regarding, I think it is 721.06.02, the classroom incentive and parties. Do we think, not necessarily at this time, but at some future point, it might be behoove us to include something about food allergies in terms of things that are brought into the classroom? I am not exactly sure how different classrooms handle it now. I'm assuming that if there's a peanut allergy in a particular class, a teacher will send a note home. But is that something that we might want to address at a policy level in terms of, overall student wellness?
We certainly can do that. We talked about that with the wellness committee, and actually the K-6 principals have met. And we thought this year best to let parents know from the letter from the classroom teacher that goes home. But we can certainly look at doing it on a global level if that's something the board would like us to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's necessary. I was curious.
I think, one of the things that we also talked about in the policy committee was kind of moving it in steps, like Gina talked about, and so it's a strongly encourage mentality in this wording right now, but we're trying to get to that place where then it starts to move the needle a little bit more so that we can get to this place that we're all talking about.
But just, and to give a little more information on that, we didn't propose it in the policy, but given the number of our students that have allergies, as we are looking to see if we can go and not offer things that have nuts in them on the district level. Obviously, it's hard to control what parents send to school, but to make it more equitable and to educate parents if they are sending food to school, that a non-food item is always safer for our kids who have allergies.
I would agree that that's something that the policy committee should look at down the road is the allergy issue. Any other questions? Dan?
Just a comment and maybe get some thoughts from other board members about the board representative that now is mandated to be on the district wellness committee. It sounds like that would be, although it's not clear, that would be an elected school board member, although it seems like the school board could appoint someone who is not a school board member to be the board representative on the committee. I'm not sure whether that is going to be an appointed position this year or next year. I don't think anybody's really discussed that yet.
I think Gina's got an answer for us. And I had a question as to why a board member is listed there, and I suspect it's because of federal law.
Yes, we do have to have a board member. If the committee has to meet a minimum of 2 times, and we have to have a board member after July 1, that's invited to those discussions.
I think that might be Mr. LeBrun, given his absence. And I think that's generally done by appointment from the board president, is the way we've done it in the past with other.
I just want to note that our advisor, our legal advisor just said needs to be invited, not necessarily attending the meeting.
Anybody want to serve? Krista? Okay, so if there's no objection, I'll appoint Krista as our board representative there, who can be invited to the meetings and decide to attend if she wants. Any other questions, Dan?
No.
Okay, I've got a couple as we go through. And I gave Krista some grammar edits, but in terms of substantive comments, on the first page of 72102.2, we talk that beverages sold or marketed must be consistent with the standards. And I think in the past we've talked about meeting or exceeding, and I'm wondering if you view that language changed differently.
Your comment first. Go ahead.
No, you go.
No. One of the things that we talked about is we have to also, for example, scoreboards have Pepsi on them as a sponsor. And so as we change over scoreboards, that in the future would become potentially one of their sport drinks or water. And so we do have some things in the school district right now that would not meet these guidelines.
That makes sense, because we're moving away from consumption to marketing, so that would be the language change. Thank you, that makes sense. In 721.023, the first sentence talks about we're going to encourage selling food that meets smart snack rules, but then we give an exemption. And my question is, if we're not mandating, do we need that exemption language in there?
So what we talked about is to reassure teachers that they could do one fundraiser, such as the cheesecake sale.
What I take from that is, while we're not mandating by the first sentence, we're essentially saying we prefer it, and yes, I got it. Thank you.
I think the important piece about that too is it's something that's not sold during the school day. So it's something that kids are taking home and selling to neighbors, that it's not something that is available for sale to students during the school day.
Okay. On the second page, the 3 areas that are stricken, the A, B, and C are prohibitions in terms of, or mandates in terms of what we will have. Where are those incorporated elsewhere in this?
So what we talked about is actually not having a policy that we're not willing to enforce. And so this is actually something that we discussed. It's not required by federal law, and while we want to encourage, for example, students to bring and carry water bottles, it just didn't feel like something we should mandate.
Well, it says students may bring and carry water bottles, which is a permissive right, and if we remove that, are we saying you can't somehow? Is that gonna be the implication?
Well, that has to be, what we do has to be, during the school day, has to be consistent with the smart snacks rules, so we felt like that was just an easier global statement.
And smart snacks, that rule would allow them to carry water bottles?
It would just not allow us to sell soda during the school day.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you guys have looked at A, B, and C, and that stuff that's omitted there, we're still gonna follow that via other aspects of this policy.
The other interesting thing too, which I wasn't aware of, is if you think back when we were in school in the vending machines, and now try and find a vending machine in our school district, and we're phasing those things out. So, or what's in vending machines are smart and healthy. So I think that addresses some of those things, which was vending machines were carrying evil things.
What is now the standard for fundraising activities by students or groups approved by the district after school? What standards are they held to in terms of foodstuffs?
So this policy would only apply for food that's sold during the school day, but all fundraisers that are sold outside the building have to be approved by the building principal and then by Dr. Bussler.
And what standard would they utilize in approving them? Is there any board policy that would guide them in their discretion?
There are administrative guidelines that we follow, but in terms of if they can, what type of food, there's nothing specific in terms of healthy food or not, although Dr. Bussler can correct me.
Because I remember conversation when we first adopted this policy about trying to move the booster groups to more healthier options and encourage them to do that without being the cookie or the cake Nazi. Cupcake Nazis, as we were being referred to for a while. So I just wanted to know where we're at on that spectrum. Are we now backing away from encouragement of healthy stuff, or is it carte blanche?
One thing that is, I think, interesting to note to your point is at concessions, which are run by the Booster Club, which everyone probably knows is, Amy has worked with them, and so while they do offer a wide variety of snacks, that the healthy snacks are positioned in front of all the non-healthy snacks. So that's, again, another movement toward, and so I think we're taking the tack of having policies, but then also working with people first in terms of moving that needle and encouraging them. And that's working well.
I was just going to add to that for board members' background. We have strongly encouraged the sale of healthy snacks, particularly at our big events. And the Sports Boosters Club has done a nice job with that. But I'll also say, there's nothing in board policy or nothing in an administrative rule that prevents the boosters from selling soda or from selling hot dogs. And if we wanted to advance a stricter policy, I know we would need to have a dialogue with our sports booster clubs, because that money also gets transferred back into our sports programs. And I may not like this, but I know the school district never taught kids how to eat pizza. But kids love to eat pizza. And I think we've been very responsible in terms of our food choices, but we haven't mandated or eliminated certain food choices.
Is there any statement in the policy that says with respect to out of the school day fundraisers where there's the sale of food, that we encourage them to offer healthy foods? Just as a position of board policy?
7210604, I don't know if this goes where you want, but it says food and beverages offered or sold at school-sponsored events should promote good health and nutrition.
That's it, that's what I was looking for, thank you. That's all the only other comment I had with respect to, I had a number of grammar stuff with the wellness committee, but on 72108 with the wellness committee, and Gina, this is, I think, something we have to wait for the Wisconsin Supreme Court decision as to the extent to which, if we're gonna require them to retain records of it meetings, do we also put in there a policy that they'll be posted? Or whether we're gonna handle that on a situation that emanates out of your office?
Amy and I had talked about that we should let Janie know when they're meeting and we will post them.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as opposed to putting it in the policy. The reason I raised that issue is because if we're gonna require them in 7210804 to retain records, that would seem to be a place to put that, or we eliminate the record retention one because it's similar vein.
The record retention is required by the federal law, so that's why it's at the end.
Of course.
And it mirrors the statutory language, but I think as I read it, the intent is that the public knows when we're meeting and knows what we're discussing, and that's why they want us to have minutes of the meetings. And so Amy and I feel that it's better to be safe and post it, since we are doing a lot of wonderful things, and it would be great if people would come and hear about them.
Great, thanks. Thank you for answering all my questions. That was helpful for me. I'm comfortable with the policy. Any other questions or comments regarding the motion that's before us from the policy committee to approve policy 721?
I did just want to commend the wellness committee and Amy Miller. They have done fabulous work.
Great, we have a motion from policy to approve changes to policy 721 wellness. Janie, would you call the roll?
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes, that motion carries 6-0 and that policy is approved. And that's all we had posted from policy committee. We're busy, thanks very much. Moving on our agenda, we're on action D3, and that's the Netherwood Elementary School easement for Alliant, and I didn't see anything in the packet, and I assume that we didn't get the easement stuff back yet.
No, we haven't.
Yep, so we'll put that on for the next agenda to approve, okay? Next item is 2017-2018 budget adjustments, our annual walk through this, what we're required to do, and Andy,
Yeah,
the floor is yours.
it's not much of a walk. Basically, this is kind of this is basically just a administrative type of thing that we have to do. It helps to reduce the number of footnotes that we get in the audit, to make sure that we don't exceed functional areas expenditures. And then it also helps us to provide better information to DPI. By the end of this week, they grab the data that we changed, and then they put it into their formulas to try to figure out what the state aid estimate has to be, which is required for them to give the school districts by July 1st. So that's the function of this. The intent is not really to change spending priorities or anything at this point in time of the year. It's just to kind of align what's happened throughout the year with our budget. So for instance, we've had some insurance claims. We have to align our budget because those claims and that revenue weren't anticipated when we obviously started the school year. Same thing would be true that we had hoped to sell the construction house. Well, that actually didn't happen. It's going to happen on July 7th, but that's after July 1st. And so that won't happen this fiscal year. If we sell 2 homes next year at this time, we'll have to increase our budget by twice the amount that we normally would, because hopefully we'll be selling 2 homes at that time. So this is just a realignment, if you would, with what kind of happened during the year. And again, the intent is not to fund anything in addition at this point in time than was originally planned in the budget.
Does anybody have any questions for Andy? Courtney?
I just want you to, no, you're not on. Okay, just wanted to clarify, this is the 2016-2017 budget. Mr. Zak, you said the 17-18 budget. So I just want to make sure we're talking about the current budget, not the future budget.
That's correct. Thanks for correcting me.
Yep.
It is the 16-17 budget, the one that we're completing at the end of this month. And then we typically just align spending practices with what we had approved before. Any other questions? Jeff, anything? Dan?
Yeah, just a point of order, our agenda that went out did say that 17-18 budget. I don't really see a huge problem with us taking action on this, but just a technicality, we might want to change the agenda to reflect that we're looking at the other budget.
I don't know that changing the agenda does it because it's posted, but the intent is to provide the public with notice, and I think that adequately does that. Gina, would you agree?
I would agree since the purple was posted with the agenda.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anything else, Dan, from you?
No.
Okay, Krista?
No.
Barb? No. All right, we'll need a motion to approve the 2016-2017 budget amendments as set forth in Andy's communication to the board. Is there that motion?
So moved.
Jeff makes the motion, is there a second? Dan's with the second. Janie, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes, that motion carries 6-0. Andy, you can appropriately notify DPI.
Thank you.
Thanks. We got a storm coming in.
Looks
Kind of
like-
fun to watch from this vantage point. Next item on the agenda is number D5, J.C. Park completion. Ryan, I think that's yours.
I can provide some overarching comments on this agenda item, and of course, any of the details, Andy can get into the details if you have some questions. This agenda item comes to you to bring conclusion to the J.C. Park project. You'll notice in the agenda item, there's a historical review of the project which dates back to 2008. That's not a typo, it really does date back to 2008. We feel like we can see the finish line with the conclusion of these final open projects. On the positive side, community members and parents have been quite pleased with our project so far, and I've heard quite a bit about it from parents and community members. Tonight's request includes two different parts. First, an allocation from Fund 21 budget monies totaling $152,000. And then secondly, $350,000 from remaining Fund 10 budget monies. Page 2 of the report, Andy has prepared, and you'll note that this includes project funding and project expenditures to date. And as we bring the recommendation, I'd just like to remind everyone that the initial budget for the entire J.C. Park project was over $4.5 million back when that evolved and was initially set back in 2008. And currently, with your approval tonight, we envision the project being completed at right around $2.5 million. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have, and of course Andy can go through any of the details of Exhibit 2 or the second page of tonight's board report.
Okay, let's go with questions. Barb, anything from you?
I did have a question, and I have to see where. I saw in the memo that there was an indication that some elements were going to be postponed to try to get the costs in line. And my question was, are all those now included? So what's listed here, is that it? Is that, are we done, or is there more?
So the only thing that is not included in this at this point in time is the band tower. We're kind of working through where that fits as far as a priority. And then the village, we've been having some discussions with them about a path that they would like to have that runs along North Perry Parkway. So those two costs aren't in this right now.
But I had the same question as we were working toward putting this on the agenda, will this be it? And the answer was yes, so that we complete it.
And the challenge with the path, and Andy and I have had several conversations with the village, is if it goes exactly where the village envisions it today, we're going to have that age-old dilemma of will it kill trees? And we're trying to figure out if we need a path, let's match the construction of the path to the time when Perry Parkway is extended. And then we've even thought on our side, maybe we make a contribution to the village to put the path on the west side of the street, because it doesn't impact the trees like it would on the east side of the street, because nothing would be worse than us installing a path and now we've lost 2 or 3 or 4 trees that are 30 years old. So that's the part 2 of what Andy shared on postponement.
Anything else, Barb?
Nope, that's it.
Krista?
Nothing from me.
Dan?
Regarding the timeline, this is really helpful. I appreciate you putting this together. I do remember something in 2013 where the board approved, I think it was $500,000 for leveling off the field. Which part of this is that particular expenditure included?
Yeah, I'm gonna count paragraphs here. I think it's talked about in the 4th paragraph. A little bit, or was it the, sorry, I'm trying to remember this here.
That was in the sentence that starts in January.
Oh, sorry.
In January 2014, I had that's my recollection
Yeah,
too, is
fifth
we were looking to move forward a little bit, and we knew we had to do that with, we knew we had to do that in terms of preparing for the site work at the high school. And so that's when we refinanced the bonds at that point in time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If you look at the attachment, it was actually on the original bond. It says funding to date, it's the first item on the left-hand side. Original bond was $127.14, grading and utilities, and that's at $500,000.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Anything else, Dan?
No?
Jeff?
Just one question. On the second page, lower right-hand corner where it lists the expenses to complete J.C. Park, are we confident those are the final numbers, or are there aspects of this that are still up for bid?
There we go. Not really out to bid. I think we're reasonably confident. That you can always run into something that you're not expected, but we do have a $44,000 contingency. So I think I've got everything covered within the numbers above, and if we're a little off, the contingency is still there. For the most part, we're out of the ground, so undercuts and those types of things that kind of caught us a little bit by surprise before or should be done. We're working through with a couple different contractors right now and just trying to make sure that we've got everything covered and hopefully be putting in the drain tile and stuff. So I think we're good. I'd say I'm 95% confident that we've got everything in here.
Anything else, Jeff?
No.
Courtney?
Well, I guess I have a long history with this project, so I'm happy that it's almost done. And I would feel a lot happier if you said you were 100% sure that this was it, because this has been, as evidenced by your summary, this has been cobbled together over the years, and in hindsight, if we could go back and do it a different way, I sure wish we could have done it differently. With that being said, two questions, one that's sort of relevant to this and one that may or may not be. One is somewhere in here, and I'm not seeing it now. You said, oh, here it is. You recently ran into, in August of 16, more issues with subsoil conditions. I mean, my God, we've been engineering that place for 10 years. What? is that about?
So, you know, we engineered it for fields before, but when you get into putting buildings and structures on that, then you run into having to have certain subsurface, certain types of material underneath those facilities so that they don't move around and that type of thing. And that's what we ran into. I'd also say that that plaza, the concrete plaza, there was lots of undercuts in there. There's a significant amount of work that we probably didn't anticipate.
Okay,
So that's where some of that as well happened as well.
okay.
So we've learned a lot. This is a project, as you said before, that's kind of feels like we're on the brakes and then we hit the accelerator, we hit the brakes, accelerator type of thing. And since the district was basically acting as the general contractor on that, we're not really set up to be a general contractor, although we do capital projects. This was a challenge for us.
Well, I appreciate that you rose to the challenge and that it's almost completed. One other question which may not be relevant to this is, I remember when we purchased the land from or was it the Village? Is there a requirement that we continue to call it J.C. Park? Because my understanding is that there are no J.C.s in Oregon, and it would be lovely if we could rename it and make it part of the Oregon School District now, and maybe call a corner of it J.C. Park or something. Call it Panther Park or something. Is that possible?
I think we need to work through the Village. It was actually a condition of the sale that was done. So there was a part of to get the land for $1.
Right.
We had to agree to call it J.C. Park East.
Okay, well, I would love to see us go back to the Village and see if we could renegotiate that or work something out that it became in the common community lexicon something other than J.C. East, now that it is officially part of our campus and our district.
And that was kind of anticipated, so as we've been going along this, when I was on the park board a few years ago, we did have park board discussions about that, and there seemed to be an openness, and so that would be the
Okay.
first committee to go through that. So perhaps Mr. LeBron can start that conversation again.
Great.
All right, I need someone to sign. There, I'm on. I need a motion to approve the recommendation to transfer funds from Fund 21 as indicated, and then from Fund 10.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Oderiko, second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just want to reiterate, I'm really happy to see this finally finished. There was a lot of pushback from folks over the years, and it's nice to see it come to fruition. And I heard that it was very appreciated last week during the girls' soccer sectionals, and that perhaps we might even need to rethink the number of bleachers because they were crowded, which means that we're a victim of our own success. So that's a good thing. So congratulations.
Yeah, we would not have been able to host those regional and sectional soccer tournaments without that field. And it was crowded, it's beautiful space when it gets completed so that we have the softball and baseball areas and that concourse done. It's just stunning, and we'll be able to host a lot of stuff here. The comments that we got from the public about that space were overwhelming, similar to what we heard yesterday about the gym spaces. You know, we're doing it right and doing it well, and then when we tell people that J.C. Park, we were careful about how we were financing it and going in a step process so that we got funds that didn't cause us to raise taxes, they're even more impressed, because that really is a $2.5 million facility that is using existing funds without going out with our hand open to seek more tax dollars. So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Wood, would you call the roll?
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes?
Mr. Zak?
Yes, that motion carries by a 6-0 vote. And Andy, would you transfer the appropriate funds and get her done?
Will do.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is open enrollment spaces for 17-18. And who gets this one? Gina? Brian?
No, I can do it. I'll test, this will test my memory. This is a 2-page report that comes down to 2 slots that we're looking at. And the quick summary is the 2 slots are because we have siblings that are approved in a different grade, and we would like to be able to grant the sibling in grade 1 and the sibling in grade 2. This does put pressure on our class sizes, but we think it's reasonable at this point in time, and otherwise, if we don't approve these siblings, we're going to lose the other child that has currently been approved.
Any questions of Brian? Anything to add, Gina, to that? How do you do on the memory test?
Very well.
All right. Barb, any questions? Krista? Anybody over on that side? Dan?
I don't remember how we're doing with class sizes in those areas. Are the new students expected to go into schools where one of the schools that has less of a class size pressure? What are the numbers right now?
Yeah, we always try to do that. Gina probably has the numbers on her computer, so I will yield to her.
So we're actually, no.
I just turned off.
Okay, we're still in the process of determining where the kindergarten students will go. We don't inform families of that until August because we have a number of move-ins that occur over the summer. But Katie makes every effort to make sure that they're even. And so these students in grade 1st and 2nd have kindergarten siblings that were accepted into open enrollment. But the odds are that they will be at Netherwood because that's where our kindergarten numbers, we have flexibility because we have an additional section there. So we always look at that when we place kindergartners and try to even it out throughout the district schools.
So would the sibling then be in that same school probably?
Yes,
And are there,
unless the parents would request otherwise. We try to accommodate requests where we can.
so Netherwood is probably the best place to put new kindergartners. Is it also the best place to put new 1st and 2nd graders?
And so we're looking at that in terms of the numbers. So if you look at our numbers for 2nd grade, as Brian said, it puts a little bit of stress on right now. But as I talked about in our last meeting, parents are really good about letting us know when they move here. When they leave, we don't know, they usually don't notify us when they move out, which I would never think to do either when I move. So we don't determine placement for open enrollees until August, ultimate placement for them. But we do share it with people in terms of our class sizes when they accept. But we're making every effort to even it out in each building.
So how,
Dan, the other point, when parents open enroll in, they can ask for a specific school, but we really only approve it on an elementary-wide basis. So if the data changes a little bit, we could go to the parents and say, your kindergartner and your 1st grader would be accepted in Oregon, however, the placement would be at Prairie View. Would that be okay with you? Again, 9 times out of 10, parents say, sure. Or they might say, no, I want this school, but I'll accept that. So we have the final decision that we would make late in the game in terms of where we would place the student. But again, we try to accommodate a parent request to the best that we can.
so where are our numbers for class sizes right now for Netherwood and those grades?
So in terms of kindergarten, we haven't made the placement decision yet. In terms of 1st and 2nd grade, you can see here that we have 1 available space, so all of our sections are at 22. We have 1 section at 21. And then in 2nd grade, we have 3 sections that are at 23, and I believe those are all at Netherwood.
Didn't we add a 2nd grade teacher last year?
2 years ago we did. I can give you the exact class size if you give me just a minute to go back to previous board reports. And right now I'm scanning through.
Exactly.
Gina, did we do our staffing report on the 24th?
We did, but and I know you have the numbers, but I just want to note that they fluctuate until mid-August. As people move out, we try to equalize it, and we also have talked to parents if the class sizes change, if they'd like to move schools. So the numbers that we have are always preliminary until right before registration.
And one of the things that we've done is indicated that with our
Somebody over
budget.
there needs to move.
Yeah.
It's too still.
That was interesting. Administration with respect to the 17-18 budget's gonna come back to us with
Right.
numbers, because we were looking at the elementary level, so we'll get a shot at that.
Dan, I just found them. They were listed as appendix 3 on April 24, in case anyone wants to reference them. Brooklyn kindergarten ranged from 20 to 21, and 22 is the size. Netherwood was 17 to 18 students, so we have some room there. Prairie View, we had 4 sections at 17. First grade at Brooklyn, we were 23, and all the classes except one, we were at 24. At Netherwood, first grade, we had 3 21s and 2 22s. And at Prairie View, we were 22 even at first grade. At Brooklyn, in second grade, we were 21 or 22. At Netherwood, we were 21 or 22. And at Prairie View, we had 2 classes of 22 and 2 classes of 23. So just based on that initial scan, it looks like, if the numbers hold true, Netherwood would be the school that has some flexibility. And I won't go into 3rd grade and 4th grade because it just affects K1, 2. But if you want to reference that, just go back to the April 24 board agenda item. It's page 14.
That answer your question, Stan?
I just had something else.
Go ahead.
Can somebody turn off? I noticed that the number of spaces available are 0 for those 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders, and we're really struggling, it seems, to keep our class sizes small in that area, which is good in the fact that people want to come here. And I think that's the area where 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, as well as kindergarten, that's where people are going to want to probably move into the district at the highest rate before the kids are already in another school. Does it make sense for us to start allocating more teachers there, given the fact that we want to encourage more move-ins or open enroll-ins? And we are also projected to have quite a bit of growth, actual growth within the district in the next less than 10 years. I think it was a few hundred, I don't remember the numbers. But I know it's an expense to put teachers there, but it's also, if you build it, they will come, with our district anyway, it seems. People want to go to school here, and I think it's good if we keep our numbers down and keep the availability for people to move in so that it stays on the radar for families who want to look for better schools for their kids who live in the area, as well as people who want to move in.
Dan, I think in the short term, we'll hear in August, I think that's when we're getting it on the budget report, what we can do short term. The long term, that's within the growth task force. I think we'll be looking at numbers from them, and Wednesday we're going to have those numbers, and it's not only just can we have more teachers, but do we have the space to put them in, and so that will be part of that report. So I think short term and long term, in the next couple months, we're going to start addressing that, so, yeah. Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, Jeff, anything?
No.
Courtney?
No.
Okay, we'll need a motion. The recommendation of the administration is to approve 1 additional open enrollment space in 1st grade and 1 in 2nd grade. I'll need a motion to approve that recommendation.
So moved.
Jeff with the motion, is there a second? Barb Feeny with the second. And we'll do a roll call on this.
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Feeny?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. That completes our wander through item D. Action items, we have discussion items, committee reports, policy. Krista.
You heard from us tonight earlier, and our next meeting is on June 20th to look at acceleration policy.
Great. One thing that consider is if, when we get here and those of us who are in policy have just some grammar stuff, how that should function so that we don't have to spend a lot of time. If we can just approve the substance here and give it to Gina and Krista to say, is that a substantive change or do we have to approve the language? And I would be interested in Gina as to your opinion as to whether or not we have to come back with non-substantive language changes or how we go about that sort of scripting detail. So, I don't need an answer tonight, it's just something to think about, okay? Vision Steering Committee, Jeff.
We have a special VSC meeting this Wednesday at 5:30. We are crashing the Growth Task Force meeting to discuss, to hear a presentation by Mark Roffers and have a roundtable discussion with the Growth Task Force. And then we'll be holding our regularly scheduled third Wednesday in the month on the 21st? 21st next Wednesday? At
Yes.
7:30 in the morning.
For those of you who are not on the Visioning Steering Committee, and if you're available on Wednesday, that's gonna be an interesting conversation.
It's at RCI.
Okay, great. Where's it? In the library, great. Thanks, Jeff. Takes us to item F, information items, open enrollment update, Brian.
That's my second mistake on tonight's agenda, so we will pass over the top of that. That was my initial thinking before we were going to, I was just going to provide you with an open enrollment update, but we've already done that.
All right. Then item 2, reallocating middle school athletics. Who gets this one?
Andy and Gina are going to speak to this.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Sorry. You may recall during the report that Gina and Mike gave a while ago, we talked a little bit about reallocating some funds rather than having the educational, the general fund pay for certain expenses related to middle school athletics, as well as you see that the agenda item kind of talks about even roam corners, and there's actually some expenses, all they're fairly minor at the elementary schools, that could be reclassified as community education expenses rather than education fund expenses. It would free up our us to have the ability to basically fund additional things throughout the district. The reason that came up with regard to the discrimination report that was talked about is that we've identified several barriers. The largest one, the easiest one to point to is actually transportation for our students for events that happen and activities that happen after school. We haven't really been able to add transportation like a late bus or late activities bus or something of that nature because of funds being tight. So we thought that this was perhaps a way to be able to add that is by moving those programs to the community education fund. Then we could also fund the bus with that community, with the community education funds. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. It also does free up some dollars within the education fund to have us look at other things through our budget. But the main focus is to move these activities and perhaps even over time, although we're not looking at doing significant things this next year, adding additional activities that would allow our students to additional opportunities for after-school types of activities. And we tried to relate this back to the visioning conference that we had a few years ago, and talking about the students who presented to the Board of Education, and actually to the entire committee, about what those after-school activities meant to them and how valuable they were. Gina?
Great job.
All right, and we've designated this as an information item because it is a significant budget issue that involves moving certain expenditures or additional expenditures from the general fund 10 to fund 80 and moving those expenses outside the levy limit. So we wanted to provide the board with an opportunity at a meeting to get an explanation and then an opportunity to ask any questions. So this is the time to ask questions or clarification of this, or to provide any feedback without it being an action item tonight. So, Courtney, do you have anything that you want to add?
No question.
I gotta try it again.
Just one, if you could explain why this would increase the tax levy.
Yep.
So basically, the community education levy is the only levy that it doesn't have any restrictions on it. So essentially what we're doing here is that levy would be increased to take over the costs associated with middle school athletics and these other activities, as well as the transportation costs. So we were estimating that, I think, between $100,000 and $120,000. $100,000 is basically a nickel on our levy rate. So essentially, we would be increasing the levy by more than what we otherwise would be limited to.
And we can do that unilaterally, there's no referendum?
For the community education fund, yes. And this isn't something that, this is something that other school districts have done as well.
Anything else, Jeff? Dan?
Nope.
Krista?
I have a,
You're red.
just have a couple. Have we done any survey research or participation research in terms of what the actual numbers could be, or what growth could occur at OMS in terms of extracurriculars?
Not to my knowledge. Sanderson, no? I don't believe so.
No, we have not. The one thing our intuitive guesstimate is there are some kids that don't participate and always haven't participated because of late bus activities. And oftentimes, they're the kind of kids that we want to participate, and they're not going to come to us and talk about that barrier. So we're trying to be proactive and address a problem we know we have. I think last year at this time, many of you received a couple of letters from our Prairie View students with the SPARK program, and we continued with SPARK this year. That's another example of a program that we would envision offering and perhaps making it bigger than just Prairie View. So we're really trying to get at the whole child, our achievement gaps, and give kids opportunities that otherwise they might not have.
And I ask that in the sense of, is it enough? I mean, I would hate to see us expand this and feel like it's working, or we can reach more kids and then coming back a second time. And my other question is, the late bus is not just a factor with OMS, it's with the high school too. Would they have access to this bus?
So that is a problem, but perhaps the money that's freed up from the education fund could fund then a bus that would then be able to service those students. That's kind of what our thinking was. I would also just share with you that community education fund is kind of a different fund now. It changed a few years ago, in that if you don't spend $1, it basically reduces your levy in the future. So I think there's, to some degree, unless they change the law, a nice ability to be able to increase this over time, and then people don't also feel the hurt of a larger cost program. You just slowly kind of implement it, and you'll learn over time as well. That's kind of what we've done with Spark. We thought we actually could have done Brooklyn this year, but it just took a little bit longer to kind of work through the issues, and now I think this next year we are ready. So that is actually in this budget as well, for an inclusion at Brooklyn.
And one of the reasons I mentioned it too is through the Youth and Sports and Athletics Task Force, we're spending, a lot of people that are on the task force are on boards of youth sports organizations, and they're doing a lot of things in terms of scholarships in younger grades. And so I do see that that's going to feed into RCI and OMS, that these kids are getting more exposure if these youth sports organizations are offering more scholarships.
Anything else, Krista, Barb?
No.
I have a couple questions. Andy, the Spark program that we're using, or the Spark bus right now, is funded out of Fund 80?
It is.
And that goes twice a week. What's the cost of that, just roughly? No, if you don't
Yeah,
guess, if you
it'd be a
don't know
guess.
off the top of your head. My reaction to this is that anytime we can get more access to students to school activities, the better. That's one interest that I have. Another interest of mine in terms of weighing this is I really hesitate to move Fund 10 expenditures into Fund 80 without being clear and having a good justifications for doing that. I'm not saying we don't have that with this or that this wouldn't qualify it. I just need a little more detail fleshed out in terms of who we're gonna serve, what are the numbers gonna look like, what specifically is gonna be there, okay? Before I have a comfort level of overriding the levy limit for these expenses. Not saying that I'm opposed to it, I just need, from a taxpayer standpoint, I think I need a little more detail than what's there right now. So, we have those two competing interests. We agree with the notion of equity and getting participation, but we also have a fiscal responsibility to make sure that they're appropriately fund 80 expenses, and that if we're going to do that, that we identify what those funds are gonna be used for. So that's my comment going forward. So, not a negative, I just need a little more detail. Anybody else? Okay. I think that takes us to superintendent report, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yes, a couple of things. First, one background item, something called tax incremental districts. And historically, Andy or the board treasurer have attended tax incremental district meetings on behalf of the Oregon School Board. And I'm just bringing to your attention that Andy is going to do that in the village of Brooklyn on behalf of Jeff.
But Jeff's actually going to try to come too.
Oh, okay, both of them are going to come. So you might be, Brooklyn started a TID program a number of years ago. Village of Oregon has a TID program. Actually, there's going to be a TID defeasement, which means the school district is going to get a check from the Village of Oregon. And we've heard that for about a year that we've been reporting that to you, but we don't get to make the call on when that distribution occurs. And I believe, Andy, we're close to a distribution on that now.
It'll be this next fiscal year, and that's how we're paying for the pool project, which we're actually looking to go to bid in about a week or two.
My second item, I'd like to get a new name. You're familiar with the first name, not the second name, Brian Hornig. And Brian he's been a longtime Findorf staff member. He is now a vice president with Findorf, and he is going to be our new owner, principal in charge when we have questions. Mike Dillis, after a long and distinguished career at Findorf that exceeded 30 years, retired at the end of May. And this past week I had an opportunity to visit with Brian and with Mike, and you'll find this interesting. Brian was on the Middleton Cross Plains School Board for a 3-year term a number of years ago, so he's been wearing the same hat and the same shoes that all of you have worn. So I knew Brian from years ago, and he's a terrific person, and very pleased that he's the individual that will be assigned to our projects in the future. A third item, Oregon High School graduation. what an incredible day in an incredible facility and the turnout we had for graduation. I always hope it's so packed that the kids really know that they're loved and supported, and that absolutely came through this past, or yesterday rather. Seems like a long time ago, it's just yesterday. Everything went off without a hitch. We learned a little bit about, we probably need a concierge near the elevator to give folks rides to the second floor. We'll fix that for next year. Just little bitty operational things, maybe a map or two, so that at the conclusion of graduation, we give individuals some alternate ways to get out of the building and take pictures, because if you come through the main area, that's a lot of people going through the main area. But again, the student speeches were just terrific. Tess Riley gave her speech, and we had 4 really, really nice speeches. And the 2017, or class of 2017, is a terrific group of young people, and I'm always super happy on Monday morning after graduation, because there's this big parent get-together with kids that goes into, I think it's over at 3 a.m. in the morning, and everyone, from what I've heard, got home safe. So that was a huge, huge success. My 4th item, the Path Forward Visioning Project, our work with Jim Rickabaugh. Jim is going to start doing some of the focus groups this Thursday. And then next Wednesday, which is the 21st and the 22nd, he'll be back in the district to do another set of focus groups with school leadership teams and leaders. Steve and I had a conversation, and Jim is super open to doing a focus group with the board, and we have tentatively, I think I sent this in an email to you, and if I didn't, it's because I really appreciate Janie being back in the district. I always appreciate Janie, but last week I might have appreciated her just a little bit more than I do on my normal days.
That's good.
So I will double check my sent email. If not, Janie or I will send you an email. Our plan would be to have it at the Innovation Center Conference Room on Wednesday, the 21st at 4:30. Again, not required to come, but if you can come, Jim would be happy to hear your thoughts and fold that into the entire focus group.
Brian, that's June or July? June?
Did I say July?
No, I'm just asking. You didn't
June.
say when.
June.
Okay.
I meant next Monday, or
Wednesday.
next Wednesday. I meant next Wednesday. We also know we're going to have sort of a makeup opportunity, because a few of our school colleagues were not able to make these 3 dates, so we're going to try to pick a date in early July, and that we should have all the focus groups completed by July 15th, which puts us a little bit ahead of schedule. And then the last item, Dr. Bergstrom handed me some information earlier this afternoon. You know, this is one of our big professional pathways week, the pathway learning areas for our professional development, and she described it as there were several of our 5 values that were on vivid display and in full bloom. I'll give you a couple of examples. Today we started a 2-day course on learning targets, formative assessment, goal setting, and feedback. You can see some of the work back to our right. That directly connects with relevant and engaging learning experiences. We have a co-teaching course for regular and special education teachers who plan to co-teach next year. You know, that has been something we have been working on in our special education program for years, and a strong theme in the equity value. We have a 2-day K-6 STEAM Academy led by 2 of our high school teachers for the K-6 teachers on intentionally embedding the design sequence into science classrooms. That is super exciting given our interest in STEAM. We have a trauma-informed schools training led by our school staff who attended a trainer of trainers workshop. Again, a great connection to the whole child. All but 2 of our sessions this week, today we had around 1/3 or 100 of our teachers in the district. By the time it's over, we'll have close to 200 teachers that have taken a different class this week. All but 2 of our sessions are facilitated by our own staff. And I know that's been a priority of the board, having our teachers learn from our teachers and having our local experts teaching each other. We also had two mental health first aid trainings this week, and since I'm a member of Oregon Rotary, the two teachers that provided that workshop presented at Rotary, and a couple of Rotarians decided to participate in that as well. So we have a busy week of learning, even though students aren't officially in school right now, and in 2 weeks we will start summer school. So that concludes my report, unless something I have said has created a question for you.
Barb?
That just brings up the question about how enrollment for summer school is going, or how much we have, are our slots filled, did we have a lot of demand that we couldn't fulfill?
Not to my recollection that we've had any demand that we couldn't fill other than what's normal. I will tell you that the one thing that's different this year is that we are offering Camp Invention as a summer school class, and that we are at around 360 students. So that's a significant difference that we haven't had in the past. That was a group that typically had just kind of run the camp, but having it part of summer school was advantageous in that it reduced the barriers for kids to participate. It actually starts next week, and the response has been just unbelievable. So we'll have more minutes probably next year or this summer than we have in the past, just significantly because of that. So that's been good. I'm not, Gina, are you aware of any other things that are different this year? Or?
No.
Okay, so that's the main thing.
Great. Anything else for Brian? Future agenda. At your desk, we will not have a second meeting in June of the Board of Education. We have some committee meetings during that time because the administrative team will be on retreat, and they go on Monday because of economic reasons for rentals. So our next meeting will be July 10th at 6:30. And we've got items there including the United Way contract, food service pricing, a handbook issue, staffing update. And Brian and I will develop that as we move forward. Does anybody have any item that they want placed on the agenda now as we move forward? Okay, if you do, let either Brian or me know. So that's the agenda. We'll do checkout because then we'll recess for 5 minutes and we'll be adjourning over to the conference room and going into closed session. But checkout, I'll start with you, Courtney.
Nothing for me.
Jeff Raymond, Dan Kraus.
Graduation was great, school's out, hallelujah.
Congratulations on having your son graduate and being able to give him his diploma. Having done that 3 times, it's great, isn't it? Yeah. Great. Barb.
Nothing.
Krista. I've got a couple things. One, Brian, thanks for reaching out to Mike Dillis at Findorf because they have been a great partner with us and they've been a great partner for a long time. And even after our first referendum went down, Mike and Findorf stayed with us, and it was a really good sign of faith in the community. So I thank you for reaching out to him. He's been a really big proponent of the district, really good to work with. I want to echo what people said about graduation. Was the comments from the community were just unbelievable in terms of pride in the facility, and I know it's such a nice facility that sometimes you wonder whether there will be a backlash that it's too nice or too opulent or we shouldn't have something that nice. I didn't get any of that. I just got a lot of community pride and from people who came from out of town, just really impressed with Oregon and the facilities here. And the next step that we have is, and I know a number of people know this, but to make sure that people realize we're not only excellent facilities, but our instruction and our relationships with our students are as great as our facilities are. So we need to make sure that's clear. I'm gonna pass around something that came out of WASB today, something that we had heard earlier, but just hit. It relates to assembly bills that are pending, and there will be a public hearing on them at the Capitol on Thursday at 10 a.m. Two of them, Bill 282 and 269, deal with the timing of referendum questions and restricting the timing of them. The one that is really of a concern to districts substantively, and in particular the Oregon School District, is the middle one, which is Assembly Bill 268, which would prohibit recurring referendums. And we passed a recurring referendum for purposes of funding our our educator compensation plan. It would not only ban recurring referendums in the future, but it would retroactively impose on us a 5-year limit. And so that if this bill passes, that the voice of our electorate, which was a 70% approximate vote saying, yes, we want that, the legislature would override that. And so I called Dan Rossmiller today wearing my school board hat and talked to him about this, and he said he was about ready to call me to see if I was willing to speak at the public hearing on behalf of the Oregon School District on Thursday. I told him I would because these are his words, we are the poster child around the state for using a referendum to fund educator compensation on a recurring basis in the most positive manner, and the manner in which we've been told by Madison we were supposed to do was they cut funding. And so he's very interested in having our voice there. He's also reaching out to another district in the state that has a recurring referendum, wasn't specifically for educator compensation, to come and tell them our message. So I intend to do that unless you feel uncomfortable with me doing that. I would be working with Brian and Gina and Dan Rossmiller to craft the statement on behalf of our district to indicate to them that we're doing exactly what they wanted us to do, that this has been a process of engagement of our community, to advise them how much we communicated with our community, how they voted for that in overwhelming amount, and that was tied directly to educators, educator compensation, and that it has an accountability piece, and that it had the support of all our constituents. So that would be the gist of the message that goes forth. But I wanted to let you guys know what's happening and where it's going and my role involved in that. So it's very concerning. We don't know whether the bill has support in the Assembly. We specifically don't know what support it has in the Senate. We don't know where Governor Walker stands on it. The fear is that even if it doesn't go through as a standalone Assembly bill, that they'll try to put it back into the budget as they move forward with that. So that's where we go. Sorry about the bad news. Okay. With that, let's take a 5-minute recess and we'll convene at 8 o'clock over in the conference room over there, go into closed session. We will not be moving back into open session at the conclusion of our closed session, so we are concluded with our open session this evening. Thank you.
I just got it today. I think they've been working